Welcome to our Vessel Performance Info webinar, ensuring you get your required CII grade. Our guest speakers today are Ossi Matala, Product Manager of NAPA, Alexander Sasha Milakovic, Senior Product Manager and Naval Architecture Lead of Bearing AI, and Jacob Clausen, Managing Director at NAVTOR Denmark and Performance Director of NAVTOR. If you have any questions about the topics today, please type them in the Q&A section and we'll get them answered for you at the end of the presentation. Here is our host, Carl Jeffrey from Digital Ship, to explain more.
So our topic today is better ways we can manage our CII scores and where digital technology can best help and how we can get it all working faster. So this is the second in our series of 3 webinars over January to March 2024, looking at different ways digital tools can help maintain situation awareness and vessel performance. So the first webinar was on January 25th on awareness of your EU emission trading scheme exposure. And the last webinar in the series is on March the 21st on making vessel performance situation awareness easier for crew. So with CII, managing your CII score is about ending the year with the score you intended to get, and you've got multiple decisions to make during the year which might affect your CII score, such as which cargoes to accept and which route and speeds and which maintenance to do and when. And you might have pressure from customers and other objectives such as cost to consider. And we can easily imagine the perfect digital tool would show you what score you're on track to achieving and how much any decision will put you off track or on track to get there, or how much headroom you have to admit more than you planned if you're asked to speed up. But there's still different ways of getting there with digital technology, and that's what we're going to hear about today. So first we'll hear from Ossi Matala, Product Manager with NAPA, based in Helsinki. So NAPA has a CII simulator based on a digital twin of the vessel and data on its past and current routes and past performance, which you can use to predict the CII rating in the future. And second, we'll hear from Alexander Sasha Milakovic, who's a Senior Product Manager and Naval Architecture Lead with Bearing AI. Bearing is based in San Diego, and Alexander is normally based in Croatia, but today he's joining us very early from the US West Coast. So Bearing CII Optimizer uses AI to make forecasts of the end of year score and then make suggestions about how you can improve it, so you can quantify the trade-offs between costs and earnings and your CII ratings. And finally, we're going to hear from Jacob Clausen, who's Managing Director at NAVTOR Denmark and Performance Director at NAVCOR. He's also a naval architect, so NAVTOR has CII tools to support planning and achieving reduction targets, and you can break it down and get a CII score for each voyage you make. So we're going to have 3 presentations of about 15 minutes, and then there should be time for questions. So please put your questions in the Q&A box at any time, and if they're for a specific speaker, please say who it is. And Ossi and Sasha may be able to answer questions while typing while the other presentations are going on. And I'd like to invite Ossi to start his talk. Cheers.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for setting up the scene. First thing first, of course, sharing the screen. And I bet you are seeing what I am.
Yep.
Thank you for inviting. Very much interested to be here. Nice to meet you all virtually. So I will quickly go through on how a shipping company can influence in practical level on their CII rating, and then finally share a few of my thoughts on how the industry is accepting the CII and will the CII actually take us closer to the IMO 2050 targets that we have all set for ourselves. Quickly, a few words about NAPA. NAPA is a world-leading software solutions, services, and data analytics partner for ship design and operation. We provide software for ship designers, and shipping companies, and we have a history of over 30 years, and I guess this is our 35th year in operation. We have offices globally, and we're very proud of the fact that 95% of the new builds globally are built by NAPA customers, and globally there are 200 of us. And myself, I am representing NAPA Shipping Solutions business unit, where we are doing voyage optimization and performance analytics. So now to the topic. So how to actually in practice impact on your CII rating. And how we see it is that there are actually 3 main angles that you can look the CII and improve on it. So first, understanding the history of the vessel, and its operational patterns. So what are the operation speeds? What is causing the consumptions? What are the distance covered per voyage, etc. Then, of course, optimizing weather routing your current voyage. And finally, doing the prediction for the future and acting accordingly. So basically looking the past, present, and the future of your CII rating and the operation. A few examples on this. So here we have a screenshot from NAPA Fleet Intelligence platform, and we can see that the correlation between the consumption in columns and the vessel operation speed with the line graph. And if you look on this part of here, we can see actually that the vessel operation speed has dropped, even though the consumption has remained relatively the same, around 20 tons per day level. And the root cause is also clearly visible here, that the impact of the weather, of the sea margin, as we call it, has increased there and had an immediate impact on the operation capabilities of the vessel at those weather conditions. Next, of course, following up the trend lines of the vessel, here we have a consumption trend line, or hull fouling mainly, and how over time, as we all know, the performance of the vessel does tend to go down. It's decreasing day by day, ever so slightly, and at some point in the time, there is a time for a underwater hull cleaning, inspection, or dry docking. And quantifying the impact and how much excess my vessel is actually consuming gives a lot of guidance for the technical managers, for example, to make the educated decisions on which vessels require my attention, where are the biggest influence gained if performing a underwater hull cleaning, for example. And we can see over time the trend lines have been growing. The vertical lines, the breakdown in around November 21 is a hull cleaning actually for this vessel and propeller policy. And we can see immediate impact on the consumption has dropped on the trend line. Then, of course, as we all know, the CII rating, one important parameter on that is the covered distance. And here we have a few examples when the vessel was stationary by the port. We can see that the trend line, the annual AER ratio, has been growing, which has been caused by consumption while not covering any distance. So these are actually quite poisonous for the CII rating. If the vessels remain stationary for a long period of time, it means that it is still consuming without covering any distance, thus directly hurting the CII rating. And also, of course, increasing the risk of hull fouling, the growth on the hull. So the best medicine for the CII is to keep operating constantly. And when it comes to optimizing the weather, optimizing the operation of the vessel, the weather routing has a key part, not only for reducing the consumption, but also improving your CII rating. And this weather routing is actually almost like attacks CII from two different angles. First, the weather routed routes are often longer, while the overall emissions are lower. So on this example, we can see that the distance with the routed alternative, purple line, the more southern one, the distance is plus 1.5%, and the emissions are almost 5% less, which then has a compound effect on the CII rating itself. And then the other dimension is, of course, keeping a close eye on your CII rating, understanding that what is my situation today and where am I heading with my vessel if I maintain the same operational patterns. Here's a screenshot from the platform, a CII simulator that we have added on the NAPA Fleet Intelligence platform around a year ago. And we can see that this vessel is on the good side of the CII rating. The current value CII rating is B, and we can see that if she maintains the same operational patterns, she will also end up around B rating for this vessel. But that may not be the case for the vessels always. So it's most important that you keep up with your CII ratings early on from the year. Naturally, if you start just paying attention to CII rating, let's say after summer, August, September, and you are on the level C or D, there is not much you can do anymore at that point to get it to be B ratings, for example. Especially any practical measurements. So there's a lot of more on your tool palette if you start monitoring this early on in the year. But the question is, of course, then where will CII take us? Will this be one step closer for carbon neutral shipping? And in fact, the carbon intensity of the global shipping has been improving year to year for a long time now, but while also the absolute emissions are increasing. And this, of course, tells that the shipping operation is growing. You know quite well that the IMO doesn't have any direct sanctions for poorly rated vessels, but instead encourages the industry parties to reward the better rated vessels. So the CII is almost like a toothless tiger, and it will have only as much power as we are giving to it. And in the end, the stick to improve the CII rating doesn't come from the regulators, but the intention is that the carrot to improve the CII rating should come from the market itself. And on the table, we can see quite interesting results that the ABS prepared some time ago already, that how many vessels will not meet the CII ratings by 2030 without any operational changes. And from the numbers, we can see that quite big ones. So container ships, 92%, bulkers, tankers, 86, 74%. So a lot has to be done on the operational side if we wish to maintain good ratings for the CII. But then what are the market mechanisms to improve on this? So as we heard from the news many times, the time charter, the acceptance of the CII rating clause has been quite poor, and it was late 2022 when the BIMCO released its CII clauses, and that wasn't exactly well received either by the charterers nor by the owners. And in the end, the beauty of the CII is its simplicity, but that's also on the other side, it's curse. So it doesn't consider off-hire or ballast ladens, or ballast voyages are much better than the laden voyages, etc. But as we know, the importance of the Scope 3 emissions has been growing, and it's expected that the cargo owners start to demand a better CII vessels when transporting their goods. So in the end, it is the transparency that is the key for CII success. And then but when improving the CII, it should be only a byproduct of improved operational efficiency, of reduced emissions. So when a measurement becomes a target, it usually ceases to be a good measurement. So step by step, so with increased transparency, we can generate more demand from the cargo owners, which then is incentive to add the CII clause to charter parties. And then that creates intense incentive for the ship owners to improve the technical aspects and the charterers for the operational ones. Those result in a reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and in the end, CII rating will improve. So my final takeaways from here. Operational improvements are a big part of the solution. We are still waiting for the alternative fuels to break into the market. The DNV estimated that 35.4% of the results when getting to IMO 2050 target comes from the operational improvements. The acceptance of the CII has been so far quite low, and it is not yet an integral part of the charter parties. And finally, CII, in the end, is just a yardstick to measure efficiency. It's no way perfect, but the motivation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions should be the primary target, not reducing CII rating. Thank you, Carl. Back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ossi. So if anybody has any questions for Ossi, you can put them in the Q&A box and she can answer them by typing. So I'd now like to welcome Alexander Sasha Milikovic, who's joining us at 5 o'clock in the morning in San Diego. So he's looking great, as you can see, and he's going to show us how AI can help with CII, among other topics. So I'll pass over to Alexander. Cheers.
Thank you very much. I'm still in the European time zone, so I feel pretty fresh despite the early hours. Hope the presentation is well seen on the screen.
Yep.
So thank you again for the introduction, and thank you for Matti for the first presentation. I will be presenting today Bearing AI, which is a company founded in 2019, based out of Palo Alto, California. We are a team of AI engineers and shipping experts with deep expertise in building scalable AI-enabled products. Bearing is backed up by AI Fund, primarily, which is led by Andrew Ng, who is considered one of the fathers of the modern AI and a co-founder of Google Brain. We're also backed up by Mitsui Corporation, one of the largest stakeholders in the maritime shipping industry. In terms of CII rating prediction and discussion around CII in general, I would start off with this simple presentation of a time series of the developments of events of a vessel in a year. We can say that year to date, marked with YTD, is the current point in time, and what we are interested in is what is the current CII rating for that vessel. As we can see in this case, it's a D. And more importantly, what will be the EOI, or end of the year CII rating for that vessel. Of course, the issue is how to predict what is going to happen in this period from current point in time until the end of the year, in order to evaluate what are the needed changes, potential needed changes in the operational profile we're currently having in order to reach a desired end of the year CII rating. So that being said, I'm going to dwell into some of the techniques and some of the aspects that we're using at Bearing in order to solve this problem. So we are usually, when thinking about this, dividing the problem into 4 main buckets or 4 main methodological aspects of approaching this. First one is around monitoring. So that is basically answering to the question, what is my current CII rating? And that is basically looking at the historical data since the beginning of the year until the year to date, or since the beginning of the charter party agreement until the year of the date, or until the end of the charter party agreement if it has already passed. Second bucket is around forecasting, which is answering to a question, what will my CII rating be at the end of the year if I keep operations as usual? So if I don't change anything, in a liner case, if I'm operating a liner company, if I keep all my vessels at their current services, at their current deployments, or as a tramp operator on a spot market, if I keep on average same amount of contracts per month, similar average speeds, similar number of idle days, etc., what will be my end of the year CII rating, so if everything stays the way it's currently. Next one is the simulating bucket, where we are actually allowing the user to change something in the way they're operating their vessel. So we're answering to a question, what will my CII rating be at the end of year if I change my operational profile in a certain way? So if I know what I want to change in terms of speeds, deployments, area of operation, etc., how will that affect my end of the year CII rating? And the final bucket that we're looking at is the optimization, where Bearing is basically proactively recommending to the user which changes they should make in order to reach a desired CII rating at the end of the year. Basically saying, okay, currently I'm a D, I want to become a B, for example, for some reason. What are the changes in my operational profile that Bearing suggests to me that I should make in order to reach that desired CII rating? So looking at that time scale that was shown earlier, and with respect to these different buckets of methods that I just shown, we can naturally see that the monitoring part is related to the historical data. Forecasting and simulating parts are trying to help us understand what the vessel will do for the remainder of the year, and the optimizing bit is telling us what we should do in order to reach a desired CII rating at the end of the year. Again, here, the forecasting and simulating part and optimizing as well will primarily depend on the type of a vessel you're operating. Again, if it's a liner ship, if it's maybe a container ship that is operating on a fixed route, then it's a completely different story than if it's a tramp ship that is operating on a spot market. But as you will see in the next slides, we have some tools that we're using to help do forecasting, simulation, and optimization for both of these types of vessels. So I'm not going to focus much in this presentation on the monitoring bit, since I think it's the least interesting maybe, although of course it has its complications, it has its complexity, despite the fact that it's based on the data that has on the period that has already occurred, and the data for it exists. It's often challenging to parse that data, to clean it up, to remove all the errors that could be there for different reasons. So there is some complexity even around monitoring current CII rating, but there is much more obviously around forecasting, simulating, and optimizing it, since it's naturally more difficult to predict the future than analyze the past. So let's see in that aspect around forecasting, simulating, and optimizing, what are really the questions that we need to answer in order to get desired outcome from each of these method groups, and what are the methods that Bearing is currently using to answer those questions. And then we're going to dwell a little bit deeper into each of those methods and see what are the underlying mechanics of them. So first question, the first column is, where will the vessel operate? So this is more related to vessels that have kind of a fixed operating, or at least have options for fixed operating patterns, basically liner vessels. So we can deploy vessels between different services. So there are fixed options at which we can deploy vessels. And this is a question where on the forecasting side, we are basically predicting using AI, or we can just in simple terms say that it's that the vessel will just stay on the current service. That's kind of the simplest, most assumption. Then on the simulating side, the user will basically tell us where the vessel will operate, and on the optimizing side, the Bearing will suggest. I will get in a minute to what LMM stands for and what prediction of using AI actually means. Second question we need to answer is, what will be the operating conditions for the rest of the year? So what will be the speed, the weather, etc. Again, in the forecasting part, we can use some AI-based predictions, which we're going to explain in a second. In the simulating bit, the user will tell us what they think the speed and the weather will be in the planned operations for the rest of the year. Of course, the weather bit can be either input by the user, or Bearing uses historical weather data to predict expected weather patterns on those routes for the rest of the year. And then finally, on the optimization side, Bearing will suggest the speed and use AI to predict or to anticipate what will be the expected operational conditions weather-wise and the routes that the ship will take. How will the vessel behave in given operating conditions? This is one of the key parts of the entire tech stack that we have. Here, the question we are answering is around the behavior of the vessel, and for that we are using the AI-based ship performance model. So basically, one of the key things that all the solutions on the market at the moment are offering is how accurate can we be in predicting fuel consumption and consequently CO2 emissions if we know the expected operating conditions in terms of speed, weather, etc. So now I'm going to dwell a little bit deeper into first AI-based ship performance model. What is it? How did we develop it at Bearing? And then we're going to look a little bit at prediction of future operational patterns using LMM, which stands for Large Maritime Model, and then we're going to try to kind of combine all together into a final story. So AI-based ship performance model, basically as all performance model, is answering to a question on how to predict ships' fuel consumption for a certain period of time, given expected operational and weather conditions. And of course, we all know that there are some conventional approaches we can use to do this. We can use sea trials, corrected for the weather if that data is available. We use model scale testing data, semi-empirical formulas, CFD, depends. Many methods exist and have existed for many years that are used for the prediction of fuel consumption. We have noticed in our analysis, and it's kind of a known thing, that these methods are usually not very accurate. The accuracy of them, depending on the conditions, but it's usually around 80% max, depending on how you measure the accuracy, but that's usually a number that we are seeing in our tests. And at Behring, since the very beginning of the company, we have decided to take another approach, which is artificial intelligence, obviously using the historical vessel onboard data, fuel consumption data mainly, and all other data sources like the weather and the AIS data, in order to build machine learning models, artificial intelligence models that can accurately predict fuel consumption. So what does that mean in simple terms? It means that we have created a model that looks at the historical behavior of the vessel, takes the data from the history of the vessel, and then learns from that data and becomes capable of predicting future fuel consumption when similar or different operating conditions will occur. So we tell to the model, okay, you have seen how much it consumes if speed was that, weather was that, trim was that, draft was that. And then in the future, when we expect to encounter this following speed, weather, trim, draft, etc., what do you think the fuel consumption will be? And model gives us a prediction which is much higher than the one we could have gotten with conventional approaches. And this is what we believe is one of the key advantages of the AI, is that it's the added accuracy from these types of models. There's two types of models that we're developing at Behring. One is the ship-specific model, and it uses the historical fuel consumption data, AIS data, and the weather data of multiple voyages of a single ship in order to create a model that is capable of predicting fuel consumption for that particular ship. Now, this is important to stress here, is that this type of a model is applicable only to this one ship it was trained on. It cannot be easily extrapolated to other ships because it's intrinsic to that particular vessel. So we basically need historical data from that vessel in order to create and use this type of a model. These models can be very accurate depending on the quality of the data that they're trained on, the size of the data set, etc. But we have seen in practice accuracy above 98% in predicting fuel consumption using these types of models. Now you might wonder what happens if I want to see what is the fuel consumption of a vessel that I don't have any historical data for, either because it's a vessel that I just chartered in, so there is no historical data for it, or for any other reason data is missing, it has not been collected or whatever. For that cases, Behring has created something that we call a universal model. And universal model is a model that is capable of predicting fuel consumption for a vessel that we have not seen any historical data for. Basically, it was trained on in a similar way as a ship-specific model, but on data from many vessels. So not on data from one vessel, but on data from many vessels. And by doing so, we have created a model that can input any ship characteristics, any ship parameters, and basically output, and obviously expected operational conditions, and output the expected fuel consumption. These types of models are naturally less accurate than the ship-specific ones. Our experience is showing the accuracy in the range between 90 and 95%, usually in the lower ranges of that range, around 90, a little bit higher. And that's kind of a natural consequence of the fact that the ship, the details of the ship characteristics cannot be captured without training on the historical data of the ship. But this is nevertheless much higher than the traditional models, than what the conventional models would output in these scenarios. All right, so that's a couple of words around the ship performance models. Then we go next to the large maritime model, LMM, that I was mentioning Behring is using for the prediction of the pattern of a vessel for the certain period in time. Again, for a case of a liner vessel, this is in a way trivial if you know which service the vessel is going to be deployed to. So there is not much complexity around that, although there still is some, since in reality pro formas of services of liner shipping companies are not reflecting the actual reality that the vessel is going to encounter there in terms of the weather, the routes between ports, the speeds, etc. So there is some complexity there, but the real complexity comes in predicting operations of tramp vessels. So what we're doing here is we're building a technology that is based on the same principles that the latest large language models behind the ChatGPT and services as such are used. So it's basically around generative AI principles and methods around that. So we are kind of creating a model that inputs historical behavior of the global fleet, all the vessels in the world's fleet, using AIS data. We are inputting historical weather patterns, and we are inputting historical data around historical global movements of cargo and goods. And we're training a model using that data. And the purpose of the model is to predict movement of a single or multiple vessels over a certain horizon of time in the future. Of course, this is very difficult to do. And the longer the horizon is, the model becomes less accurate. But what we have found even in the initial tests, and you can see on the right-hand side, a poster that we have posted in a presentation in a conference, RIA, recently a few weeks ago, where we are showing the development of this method and how we're applying generative AI principles to maritime shipping industry. So we have managed to prove there that there is merit behind it, that there is an added accuracy in the prediction of the future pattern of a vessel that we can achieve using this technology. But there is still ongoing work around that, and we strongly believe that this is a technology that can definitely be used to help us better predict future operational patterns of vessels, and by that also help us better predict CII ratings that are expected for those ships, compared to just using simple historical averages for those vessels and the methods that are currently being used. Finally, a few words about Bearing's concrete products, at least around CII. On the left-hand side, you can see something that we call a CII simulator, where on the graph in the right-hand part of the figure, you can see in the full line, which is basically the behavior of the CII rating until the current day, year to date, which is marked with the circle, and then the forecast until the end of the year. So using terminology from before, forecast is what's going to happen if you keep your current operational profile. In liner case, what happens if I keep this ship on my current on the current service it's currently deployed to. In tram case, what happens if I keep similar average speed and idle days and number of contracts in a period, etc. And on the left-hand side, you can see some sliders that you can change and move and see how that affects your expected end-of-the-year CII rating. So you can change the average speed that you're expecting, number of sailing days, average weather that you're going to encounter, and then see how all these changes basically affect the expected CII rating. So you can very easily see that if I drop speed a little bit, is it going to be enough to improve my CII rating to a desired one? We have also an optimization bit around it, where you can actually select the CII rating and then see what the average speed should be to reach it. And finally, we have a deployment planner on the right-hand side, which allows user to upload certain schedule of a vessel for the remainder of the year. So you can see a blue vertical line, which is designating year to date, and then everything right of that is what the user simulates to be the case for the rest of the year, and then they can see how that affects their end of the year CII rating. So that much of me for now, and thank you all for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Sasha. That's fantastic and very intriguing. So now we'll go from San Diego to Copenhagen. We're going to hear from Jakob Clausen, Managing Director of NAVTOR Denmark.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll take you through a presentation looking at mastering your fleet CII rating. So we'll look a little bit more into the background, understanding the CII levers, and showcasing, you could say, what solutions we are providing to the market in terms of managing the CII rating. Just to give you a little bit of background about the company. So NAVTOR is today serving around 1/3 of the merchant fleet in the world. So we have a fairly large, you could say, customer base. Our vision is to be a force of innovation and always be at the forefront of the technology and helping the maritime industry towards safe and sustainable future. So it means that we, of course, support a lot of products relating to safe navigation, but of course also supporting in sustainability, which of course CII falls under. And to give you just a brief overview of the solution, so we have one onshore solution called NAVFleet, and then we have cloud solution to sync all the data from our onboard solutions, which is a very comprehensive, covering everything from digital logbooks, noon reporting, our nav station, planning station on board, with all data layers connected to ECDIS, and synchronization, of course, of all the data, voyages, and so on into our ecosystem. So this is what we do. I will be mainly talking about the NAVFleet and the intelligent solutions we provide mainly on the shore side. So about the CII, just to give a brief, we say, background. I mean, a lot of people may already know it. I mean, it's basically based on you could say collected 2019 baselines. Then there is a 2% reduction trajectory from that. And then ships are subject to CII rating. They need to, you could say, incorporate this in their SIM Part 3. So they need to have a prediction, of course, over the next course of the next 3 years, and have an implemented plan for achieving the required CII. So if you're not complying, then you need to have a plan. I think, as Ossi mentioned, there's not a hard enforcement, but I think it's more the market, you could say, the market that would require tonnage that is, you could say, in a reasonable good rating, so sea level rating or better. And of course, the lower figure you have, the higher rating you achieve. So the lower the CII or AEI figure is, the better it is. There are, though, some financial incentives, of course. Some of our customers are signatories to some of these. There are the Poseidon principle for, you say, financing of fleets. Another one coming up is for marine insurance, and this is all about, say, you could say, managing that your fleet's alignment. So the overall fleet rating determined by a certain system is following a reduction trajectory. And this is also something, of course, we are looking into how we can support, so our customers can be, say, in control of where they end up at the end of the year, or say a year ahead from now. If we look at what is impacting the CII and the emissions, you could say, so if we look at the distance, so this is, of course, there are a lot of different dynamics here. So on the operating profile, we of course have the speed profile, or the average speed, you could say, over longer periods. We have the time sailing or time idling, so how active is the vessel? So that is, of course, counting up on our distance and accumulated distance here. And if we increase the distance, of course, we improve the rating, assuming the emissions maintain constant. If we then look at the emissions, there's a lot of, so the CO2 part, and now I'm just simplifying it a lot for those wondering. I mean, I've not included all the you could say exclusions, correction factors, and so on, just for simplicity here. But of course, if we look at the dynamics, what is then influencing this? Well, there's a lot of different things. Of course, in the operating profile, it's about the loading condition, how you say much time you spend laden, intermediate ballast, the weather impact if you're changing where you're operating in the world. If we look at the vessel performance, in-service performance, so Alexander talked a lot about the vessel-specific modeling and things like that. So that, of course, we also cover. So there's a lot of things with regards to the speed and consumption, how that changes over time, the hull and propeller fouling, the engine's efficiency, so how efficient do we produce the energy to propel the vessel, or energy used on board for other purposes. How are, you say, the auxiliary machineries utilized on board? I mean, there are large variations even between crews. And then, of course, also some of the fuel types, fuel mixes. There are more new alternative fuels coming to the market. I think biofuel is one of them. And we support, you could say, simulation of a lot of these different factors. So this is, of course, all the things you could change upon to, you could say, change the outcome. If we then look at the solutions we are providing, so we are leveraging, you could say, our emission simulator, our voyage estimator, and an emission and CI dashboard. So on the emission simulator, it's very much about, you could say, the more long-term planning. So planning for a certain outcome. So if you want to, at the end of year, end up at a given rating, there are multiple levers you can pull to get there. And what we can provide in the emission simulator is like different ways to, you could say, you can change your operation or your strategic deploys, utilization of assets within the fleet to get to a certain point. The other is the voyage estimator, which talks more into when you're about to execute voyages, how you execute them, what route you're taking, speed profile, the loading and loading conditions, the weather impact, and having a clear idea about between, you say, owners and charters, like you have a shared view on what CII rating will this end up being, and what would be, say, emission cost for this. The other part is the, you could say, ongoing monitoring. So we have a number of different emission and CI dashboards. So not only looking at CI, but also looking at other emission and KPIs. So of course, on an ongoing basis, tracking where are we heading, what are the courses for the CI changing for certain vessels, and diving more into that. So in the next part here, I'll jump a little bit more into these in this sequence. And of course, this is kind of a circular. So of course, when we collect all the data, it goes back to the mission simulator and kind of being utilized again. So our emission simulator is about harnessing the vessel-specific models we have, the historical data, to determine the CI ratings across, you could say, a diverse operating scenarios for both the fleet or for the vessel. So the starting point is that we know from history, like how is the fleet in, you say, operating profile. So we have that kind of as a start guess, or the starting, you say, starting point. So this is what Alexander called like business as usual. Like if you continue not changing anything, like projecting out, you could say, out to the future, what you're doing right now, we can predict where will you end up. The other part is that for a given segment now, we have some MR tankers, so they are grouped under MR. So we can, for each segment, we can set then specific changes to these. And for this case, we have selected one vessel here where we then change what the speed profile should be. Could also be the sailing or utilization. We can change on the fuel blend utilized. So we can do that either on fleet, segment level, or vessel level. So it could be that you have one vessel that you see is not performing. It may be just be that it's outdated or old and have less efficiency. So you may want to apply a different strategy for how you deploy that vessel to still, you say, maintain a certain level of efficiency. So that you can simulate by picking it out and changing just that specific vessel in the simulation itself as well. And the outcome is that when we have then inputted which vessels we want to simulate, the operating profiles to be applied, we then get a prediction on the fleet level, so we can see how the CI rating will develop over time. We can also see a forecast on the annual efficiency ratio, which goes into your Poseidon principle and so on. We can see some simple emission metrics here that we can also, of course, also export. If we drill a little bit more into the individual vessels and how it looks like, then we can see what will be the rating for individual vessels over time. How will they develop? Because they each have, you could say, different ways of performing. So we factor in each specific model here, and we can give a, say, prediction out, and you can of course also export. And for the individual vessels, of course, we can also dive into selecting a specific vessel. We can then look into, okay, how is this developing in the projection of what it's going to be doing in the future. If it has, here we also factor in, you could say, a certain, you could say, efficiency degradation over time. So there are different levels we can look into. Finally, if we want to create several different scenarios and then compare it, it could be that we change certain things so we can see how would that end up, how would the rating distribution be different from year to year, and what would be doing to our fleet forecast, our fleet alignment in general. Next, I would like to jump to the next part, which is the voyage estimator. So this is very much about analyzing the speed, rule, leveraging the vessel's performance models, and then also evaluating on different fuel mixes. So you can add, change the fuel mixes being utilized. The basic input is that you, for a given vessel, select the voyage itinerary, the expected departure. So this is of course also relevant in terms of the CII rating, ETS, and so on. A loading condition, and then you have the ability also to say how much idling time it would be having. You can also specify if you want to have any EUS cost calculated here, and then of course the fuel mixes, and that gives you out your expected CII for that given voyage, as well as you could say EUAs and voyage cost in general. The other part we do on the monitoring part is we have a overall fleet dashboard that states, like, it could be the year to date, but we can of course dive into all kind of different periods of time. This is just one brief overview of snapshot of how it looks like for a given period of time. Of course, we can drill down and provide more metrics for each individual vessel to make it more specific, and also dive into, you could say, the low performing. Why is it low performing? Understanding it better, and then we have, you could say, different filters, analysis tools, where we could dive into, you could say, what is causing it. In this case, it seems to be that there's an increase of idling. So that means that you accumulate emissions while you are not doing any distance, accumulating much distance or very little. So that is, you could say, giving some contextual information, contextual insights that you can overlay together with, you could say, your actually achieved CI over time. So this is, you could say, all in all, what you could say, some of the tools and solutions that we provide from NAVTOR side, and that of course connects up with our ecosystem. So that's all I had for showcasing today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jakob. So if you want to just stop sharing and invite everyone to turn their cameras on, so we'll go to the Q&A session now. So there's been lots of questions being answered by typing. So Aaron Joshi, who's asking lots of questions, he's a senior data scientist with Maersk in India. He was just asking about the accuracy. I think we've got a question from me. I don't know anything about what the shipping industry is doing with CII. I don't know if anybody is able to talk in generic terms without sort of revealing any secrets, but I mean, did you see a massive uptake in customer interest, or a lot? There's an interesting comment from, I think I'll see that if your score is a D in August, you're screwed for the rest of the year, which I was quite shocked. I imagine lots of companies would be shocked if they probably thought they could get out of any difficult problem in the last month. I don't know if anybody is able to talk about what's happening in the industry in sort of generic terms and how companies are dealing with digital technology. Are they getting the answers and the scores they want? Is anybody able to? I know it's always tricky talking about customers. I don't know if it's something you're able to, well, not specific customers, but generic customers. Is that?
Yeah, I can give an answer from our side. Our experience is showing that there is differences. Some customers find CI very important. Some don't find it important at all. The main pressure comes usually from the cargo owners. So if you're an operator that transports cargo for the owners who are very, let's say, environmentally conscious, and to their customers, it's important that their entire value chain, supply chain, is environmentally friendly, then they will find CII as an important factor. Those who don't, then they will have less interest. But what we are constantly seeing, as of course we know that the decarbonization trends in the maritime shipping industry are becoming more stringent and more stringent. And the CII is just one of the metrics that are used to capture that. So it's inevitable that the decarbonization is going to have to happen, and then it's going to naturally impact the CII. So CII is kind of not the goal; it's just one of the instruments that are being used to reach those decarbonization measures. And we think it's actually quite a nice instrument, very handy, very easy metric to measure efficiency of a vessel. And we are also seeing many ship owners using CII as even as an efficiency measure for a vessel. They would ask, what is the CII for this upcoming voyage charter going to be, even though it doesn't necessarily have a physical meaning in terms of CII being the yearly value. So it doesn't matter what is it for a single value as you look at it cumulatively for the whole year, but they will take a look at the efficiency and say, okay, if CII rating is needed, then that's probably a very inefficient voyage. So is there something I can do to improve that? So in short, it's starting to pick up, and we are very confident that in the future it's going to become even more important, especially as IMO puts more tangible as let's say cost on the CII rating itself.
Yeah. And if I may add on that, as Alex said, it's a good, quite simple, easy to understand grading, and everyone gets a feeling that A is better than C, and so forth. It's also the shortcoming of the CII rating that it's not all inclusive. It doesn't consider all the operation patterns, and it has had its fair share of criticism from the industry. But for those reasons, it is a KPI among the others, and it should be considered as such. And as I said through my presentation, the acceptance has been rather poor on it. Some of the shipping companies consider, some of don't hold it in a great value. But I think the overall trend line is that it is more and more coming part of the everyday business, everyday operation of the shipping companies, especially now that we are on 24 already.
I think from my perspective, I mean, I think the biggest concerns I heard here right at the moment right now from especially from the owners is partly to get you could say the quality right in terms of CII, in terms of making sure that they get all the you could say exclusions and reductions correctly in place, because a lot of, especially you could say customers coming into us has that as a big concern, that they recognize that data quality of what they collect in just in simple means of distance, but also getting, I mean, all the correction factors for, say, if you're doing cargo heating, discharge, cooling your cargo, STS operation, all these kind of things. And the other big part, I think, that is drawing a lot of attention now is slightly different, coming from a different regulatory body, but coming from the EU side on the EU ETS is another, I would say, where a lot of focus is right now. I think it's those two things. But from my perspective, like looking at past years and right now, I think there's more attention to CII than I've seen for the past couple of years in terms of like really being interested in the outcome. I mean, people know that they should be doing something, but I think they realize now that that there's more attention to it now. Maybe from the charter side.
Well, very good. Well, we have 6 open questions in about 6 minutes. I mean, maybe I'll just read through the questions quickly, and then we can sort of decide which one do you want to take. So Karan Tikare is assistant superintendent with Kaizen Ship Management in Mumbai. So we're going on happens if the speed is on the time charter. So you've got contractual obligation to do a speed. How do you tackle that? Girish Sharma, that's part of another discussion about crew. I'm not sure what RPA is. So Avinash Hingorani is talking about sort of comparing AI with other methods like CFD and engine test data. I suppose we'll have to wait and see, perhaps. But I think there's already been some data about the accuracy of AI. Ali Reza is asking about the monthly fee. I think that's normally a question we don't take on we don't take on a webinar, but you can welcome to contact people privately about that. Matthias is asking about CII regulations on other vessels, a bit of a different direction. Karen is asking for the calculation of CII. Girish is talking about robotic process automation. So there's many different themes. Perhaps we take a minute each to if you want to take any of those. Should we go back to Alexander? Do you want to anything you'd like to answer out of those?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think that maybe to answer Avinash Hingorani's question around what is the accuracy improvement achieved by using past data and AI when compared to traditional methods. So we're seeing on average, it's very difficult to universally answer this question, but on average, we have seen that the traditional methods in our experience were around 80% accurate, or that's the ballpark of the kind of highest accuracy values for those. And AI is, as I said, 90 to 95% for the universal model, and even 98% plus for the ship-specific model. The reason for that is obviously since the vessel degrades over time, things happen, fouling, engine degradation, addition as you have wrote down for alternative technology. So maybe there was an energy saving device installed recently. So all that is actually engraved in the data. You cannot simply take speed consumption curves from the sea trials and then expect that those will be followed until the end of the lifetime of the vessel. So there's many things technically that are changing and that are actually engraved in the data that we're seeing and that are reflected with these models. And on top of that, accounting for the weather, it's much more accurate to do it using AI trained on the historical data than simply have coefficients for the weather, which are based on the Beaufort scale that is a usual practice and that are very average and very rough and not as accurate even closely.
Oh, well, Jakob and Ossi, so I mean, it's not like AI or not AI, because you're doing data modeling, which is generally called AI. I mean, I think a Bering's universal data model is quite intriguing, but that's all. Do you want to share your thoughts on how AI fits in this debate, or how even people should understand what it can and can't do?
Yeah, of course, it's a long-lasting, let's say, discussion on how the AI should be used, and it definitely has a very bright future on it. But also, like the modern principles that we do at NAPA, it's built on the naval architectural principles and the shipbuilding expertise that we have in-house, and that is still a starting point for the model. So how we do is that we feed the hydrodynamical model, what we have from the vessel, with the data that we gather from the ship directly, but also from the AIS data and weather data and all that, and keep teaching the model from that point of view. So, and one benefit of that process is that our models are not black boxes, so we can always open up and see what's inside, what's going on, and then at least we argue that that gives the best possible starting point for the modeling, so that we don't require, let's say, past 2 years of operation data, but can start immediately and today.
Well, Jakob, I think you get the last word. We've got about 2 minutes left.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah. I mean, we keep. You could say, I would say we probably keep our approach somewhat in the middle. I mean, we don't do a black box approach at all, but it's more. I mean, we are taking an approach more on the supervised learning, or you could say taking, you could say some physical constraints, and then you could say tuning based on that. So we also know that the outcomes. I think that the challenge with the quality, or you could say accuracy, is you could say, yeah, you can accurately predict, you could say, how the vessels will perform under certain conditions, but I think the difficulties is that you would not have that much information about like what it will do in a month's time. If we talk about the tramp shipping, it's very stochastic. So and it's the human decisions, like and all kind of outside things that is influencing what a given owner would do with its vessel, putting it into a pool, or like there are so many variables that we cannot, you could say, in predicting CI. Yeah, predicting vessel performance is one thing, but I think the CI is a consequence of many different choices, including a lot of commercial decision making, which is like predicting stock markets, in my opinion. I mean, it's a little bit the same as saying we can. I would say that it's very difficult to say what the outcomes would be. And our approach is more that the best guess is actually asking the one sitting, say, operational at the desk, taking the decisions about like what will happen tomorrow, what are they contemplating doing. Because I think that is more likely that would be the outcomes of what would happen to certain vessels or vessel groups within their fleet. Yeah, but we are also, you could say, already have invested a lot, and we're investing even more in AI, I would say, in our R&D portfolio. So it's not because we're not doing anything.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic. Well, that's kind of not the direction I thought this would take. I think everybody in the world needs to be an expert on what AI can and can't do, because it's a subject that's going to be growing and growing with us. But thank you ever so much, Jakob, Ossi, and Alexander, Sasha, and I shall pass back to Farah for the closing words. Cheers.
Thank you to our guest speakers, Ossi Matala from NAPA, Alexander Sasha Milhovic from Bearing AI, and Jakob Clausen from NAVTOR, and to all our viewers. We'll be sending you a YouTube video link soon with contact details if you have any further questions. Join us for our next digital ship webinar on the 5th of March with EY, which you can book online at our website. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone. Thanks, everyone, for attending.